In the 1960s, Bob Lord, the son of a barber who ran a successful chain of butchers, became Burnley FC's chairman and presided over the most successful spell in the club's history. As a vehement opponent of televised football, Lord banned BBC Match of the Day cameras from Turf Moor during the first airings in 1964 for a full 5 years thereafter. Lord was so concerned televised games would stop fans from going to support their local clubs, he proposed that no live football should be broadcast on British TV sets at the traditional Saturday 3 p.m. kick-off time. This quite radical stance against TV, along with Burnley's prominence in the game at this point, forced the hand of the authorities to the extent that the rule stating no televised games would be aired between 2:45 and 5:15 on a Saturday afternoon was enforced. Although a critic of the football authorities and regularly airing opinions that would make Mussolini seem like a staunch man of the left, Lord manoeuvred his way into the establishment that rubber-stamped the proposal, shaping what we have come to know as the traditional British sporting Saturday afternoon. Fast forward about 60 years and you will find England, Scotland and Montenegro, for what must be a strange reason I have not fully looked into, are the only countries in the world that still uphold this rule of not allowing live games during these hallowed Saturday afternoon hours. As we will explore here, this is not an accident or something that has slipped the mind of those in positions of power within the game. The fact that the Premier League, the world's biggest football league, is also the domestic league in England is not just a coincidence either. There will likely be more and more pressure to scrap the 3 p.m. blackout rule, and right now the powers that be are doing everything they can to quietly bat these suggestions away. And it's not because the Premier League does not want to make more money by selling more games to TV networks. It's because scrapping the blackout rule now will provide the Premier League with, let's say, some major complications. It will very likely provide a watershed moment for the Premier League itself, change the nature of the TV deals that fund the game, and threaten the very existence of Sky in its current form and a host of other traditional broadcasters off the back of it. This is a deep dive into why the 3 p.m. blackout rule, despite going largely unmentioned, plays such a pivotal role for the future of football in England and around the world. We should really start here by asking the question, well, actually, is the rule just in place for what remains a very good reason? Protecting lower league clubs whose gates would suffer should high-profile Premier League games be shown on TV at the same time. After all, there are people who stand by this, and Premier League Chief Executive Richard Masters said at the Financial Times Business of Football Summit, "We've been proponents of Article 48, i.e. the 3 p.m. blackout rule, for the entire Premier League, and I don't see that changing in the near term. However, the bulk of opinion suggests that it would make a difference so small to lower league clubs that no one would really notice." An article in goal.com states, "There has been research about the impact of televised football on matchday attendees, with the consensus being that there is little to no correlation. If you are a local supporter, you would attend your home game regardless of who played at 3 p.m. on television. It certainly seems difficult to prove qualitatively that anyone would suffer right now as a result of the rule, or quantitatively for that matter. I suspect that this would only be revealed after a while, after any new law was passed. The other aspect to mention here, of course, is piracy. This rule was based on the presumption that no one could access the games on TV, which they can and do, as piracy remains as popular as ever. The consensus is generally that the law is relatively ineffectual, and there is little evidence that it affects lower league gates. Now, despite this proving to be something of a non sequitur, it would probably remain largely unnoticed. But the EFL, i.e. the body responsible for the Championship League 1 and League 2 in England, has been actively exploring this very possibility. In order to scrap the rule, The EFL would need permission from the FA and UEFA, and there are no particular reasons to believe these would be insurmountable. EFL director Rick Parry is quoted as saying, "We are almost unique in Europe now in having a blackout period," said Parry. "I'm not presuming that 3 p.m. blackout goes, but equally, if we're looking at streaming, at new technologies and new broadcasters, we will probably have to be open-minded in terms of scheduling." This is quite a removal from the Premier League's attitude to the rule. Sky has been broadcasting the EFL since 2002, paying £119 million to show 138 games per season. The current deal ends in 2024, and media companies are jostling for position as they see an opportunity to take over these rights, particularly if they are able to air the 3 p.m. kickoffs. A quote from 90minutes.com, for example, shows the type of negotiations going on here. DAZN and other broadcasters have indicated they would like to see the rule removed from the 2024-25 season so they can show all 1,671 EFL matches live each season. This may work in a number of different ways for the consumer. It may likely be the case that all games on the network are available via a subscription, much the same as it works with Sky now. It could be a case that fans pay a subscription just for their club, something people refer to as a digital season ticket. The underlying point here is that this represents an opportunity for the EFL. They are the ones who seem to be pushing the agenda for scrapping the 3 p.m. blackout, when they are supposedly the very people who benefit from the safety it offers. Ultimately, we can only assume that if the EFL can make more money through broadcasting rights, they can make what seems like a strong case that this would outweigh any potential revenue losses for the clubs due to reduced gates. Now, if the EFL have made this decision, it sort of makes a mockery of the Premier League's position on the blackout rule. The very people they are allegedly doing this for have just gone and scrapped it themselves, and with it, the Premier League's most convenient method of justifying the blackout rule. So this begs the question, why on earth would the Premier League not welcome this change, as it gives them more games to sell and more revenue to make? Well, there are a few moving parts here. The first thing to bear in mind is that the UK market for the Premier League is still at the moment the single largest market in terms of revenue by some distance. I have covered in another video how the international markets are growing considerably and the implications that may have. However, the deal that exists in the UK has gone through years of analysis and negotiation and is very finely balanced. Broadcasters bid for packages carved out from a total of 200 Premier League games each season. Without going too far into the weeds here, the packages that each company wins dictate what pick of games they get and the time slots that are allotted to those games. For example, TNT Sports has the early Saturday kickoffs, with Sky having the bulk of rights including Saturday evening, all-day Sunday and Monday night football, along with the first pick of the fixtures they want the majority of the time. Amazon have been dipping their toe in the water and tend to buy rights around Christmas and New Year, as driving high engagement on the platform at this time translates well into the shopping and retail part of their service. Now, should the 3 p.m. blackout rule be scrapped, a further 180 games would become available. But this is problematic for a number of reasons. The first being that out of the 200 that are sold already, the vast majority of the biggest games are included in these packages. The equation for Sky here is, will buying more rights to smaller Premier League games, like for example Bournemouth versus Wolves, drive more Sky Sports subscribers? The answer is more than likely that it will be somewhere between no and minimal. Certainly not enough to justify the expense of acquiring more rights. So if it makes no sense to Sky, and potentially to TNT, then surely other companies such as DAZN would be keen to pick up the slack here. They most certainly would. exclusive rights to Bournemouth versus Wolves would generally rate way higher than any of their other current offerings, such as the power of the Premier League product. However, this is one of the areas where things get trickier. As mentioned, the current deal is finely balanced. Sky, TNT and Amazon are paying huge money not only for the rights, but for a certain amount of exclusivity. By making every game available on a multitude of platforms, the product gets diluted. The equation then for the Premier League is, can we sell the remaining rights, much of which relate to the smaller clubs in the league, to offset any reduction in Sky and TNT's bids as a result of this dilution? This is a very risky game to play and is one of the reasons that the Premier League do not want to play it. It is also a good reason why the Premier League do not welcome the EFL discussing the issue with a view to opening up this particular can of worms. This is another reason why the Premier League may want to buy the EFL, something I have explored in another video. There is another consideration for the Premier League here. They are constantly assessing whether they should go D2C or direct to consumer and cut out the broadcast middlemen completely. If this is something they look to do in the next couple of years, and I think that is probably a big if at this stage, this all sort of becomes irrelevant and all the pieces will be swept off the board. Sky knows how to sell the league, market it and bring it to the consumer. That is a major consideration for the Premier League, not just in the UK but also in places like the US, where NBC has similar reach and influence. So until the Premier League does make the jump to D2C in the UK, it would rather not deal with the implications of the 3 PM blackout. If it can bat this down the road until then, that would be preferable. Although there is another scenario here. If the rule was to be introduced, the Premier League's own D2C service could show these games. As discussed, in the immediate short term this may cause ruptions and potentially loss of profit. But it would get the service off the ground and into the public psyche, getting itself ready to show all live Premier League games and be the exclusive distributor of the content. This also raises the question around the Premier League's relationship with Sky. In all the years of the Premier League, Sky has never realistically ever been challenged to the main bulk of rights. The agreement has always suited both parties, and until this point, only the secondary rights have realistically been available to the highest bidder. I think it is fair to say the Premier League and Sky have always had a special partnership, and until this point, they have been the making of each other. But how far does the goodwill between the two extend? The Premier League at some point will go direct to consumer, but will they give Sky fair warning? Can Sky put them off completely? How will the relationship be managed in the meantime? If we take a brief look through the history of Premier League broadcast rights, we can start to appreciate how the different deals have already affected Sky. When Setanta gave up the Premier League rights abruptly in 2009 due to financial trouble, ESPN stepped in. This kind of deal was perfect for Sky, a junior partner who was never looking to spend more than a limited amount in the UK. Sky were far less happy when BT put in a huge bid thereafter to acquire these rights. This was because BT were willing to spend and compete with Sky, not only in terms of TV, but for broadband and phone customers too. They also took complete exclusivity of the Champions League, outbidding Sky as they did so. To some, albeit lesser extent, Sky's nose has been put out of joint before, as the competition has increased. Now, Sky will say publicly that they are able to diversify away from football if they need to. After all, they offer a lot more than just the Premier League. In a piece on Sporticus.com in April 2022, Sky Sports Managing Director Jonathan Licht made the case that the company is in a position to thrive in any such scenario. If we didn't have the Premier League, as upsetting as that would be, there's been a big push to make sure the business is diversified, said Licht, who has been with Sky for nearly 25 years. We hope we never have to challenge that fundamentally, but the business has become singularly less reliant on one individual process or outcome. One of the major bets Sky seems to be making here is to become chief aggregator of TV, including apps such as Netflix on their service. However, any way you look at it, it seems pretty incomprehensible that Sky could operate in anything like the same fashion were it to lose Premier League football, and a huge percentage of their Sky Sports subscribers would go along with it. So this all makes sense to a large degree. There are big crossroads coming up for football and the way it is funded. Implications like the 3 p.m. blackout offer as much of a threat as an opportunity and may accelerate some of these things. Sky seemed to face some particularly large hurdles. However, it was only in 2018 that US giants Comcast bought Sky. Surely they would be alive to these threats. Are we missing something here? In a piece with an industry analyst about this sale in Deadline.com, it stated the following. Comcast still hasn't said why they bought it, Sky, nor what they plan to do with it beyond simply running it as it is, nor have they articulated any vision for why they wanted to own Sky beyond simply arguing that it is a better business than most people think, said Craig Moffett of Moffett-Nathanson. So while the reasons for the purchase remain mostly unclear, there have been a number of suggestions from business insiders that Sky was a crucial purchase because the Sky Box is present in millions of European living rooms, offering a platform for more services and Internet of Things technology in the future. Some say that a company the size of Comcast simply could not afford to pass up buying other successful media outlets when it had the chance, as more and more giant media operators look to consolidate. Some point to Comcast's track record of selling infrastructure and products on a B2B basis, and the Sky acquisition gives them greater reach to do this. Whatever it is, there seems no explicit reasoning that the Premier League rights remain a foregone conclusion for Sky in the years ahead, and that Comcast's acquisition was part of a larger strategy. If the 3 p.m. rule does get scrapped before the Premier League can go direct to consumer, this will invite a plethora of streaming giants to acquire Premier League rights, with every single game being up for grabs. In March 2023, Bloomberg reported on this issue. Apple is considering bidding for the streaming rights to a range of English football games, according to people familiar with the situation, a move that would step up its sports ambitions and increase competition with Amazon.com's Prime Video. So, as well as this lack of exclusivity that scrapping the rule would bring, more and more tech giants will be invited on board to air the Premier League. While these guys are not necessarily likely to be selling broadband anytime soon, although who knows, they could hardly be described as a junior partner as such, which again is not a comfortable position for Sky to be in. Now, there are some wider considerations at play here as well. Any repercussions for Sky in this manner will have a domino effect throughout the traditional broadcast landscape, which is already taking heavy losses. Most viewers still watch football via traditional pay TV methods. However, in a wider context, traditional TV is getting eaten by streaming. An article from The Guardian reports, in 2025, British consumers are forecast to spend $4.2 billion on subscription video-on-demand services, including Netflix, Prime Video, Disney Plus, and Apple TV, etc. This compares with the $4.1 billion that is predicted to be spent on TV subscriptions from providers including Sky, Virgin Media, BT TV, and TalkTalk. A tipping point that means it has taken just 13 years for streaming to eclipse traditional pay TV since the change in viewing habits began with the arrival of Netflix in the UK in 2012. Although this has been on the cards for some time and we've all seen it coming, it's probably worth mentioning that traditional TV has been propped up by three things: live sport, news, and appointment to view shows such as Strictly Come Dancing. It has become almost impossible for traditional TV to compete long-term with middle-of-the-road entertainment shows. This is one of the reasons why companies such as Fox have sold many of their assets to concentrate on news, for example. Without the pillar of live sports, particularly Premier League football, traditional pay TV broadcasters who appear on the Skybox will be deemed surplus to requirements, starting a collapse in the pay TV ecosystem and the existence of many of these channels. So there are many factors in play here and a lot of politics to negotiate. To summarize, we can look at it in one action followed by 3 scenarios following that action. The action is if the EFL decide, as it looks like they might, to scrap the blackout rule at the end of their current deal with Sky. Then this will immediately ask the question to the Premier League, why are you not now doing the same? There are essentially 3 paths the EPL can then take from this stage. Number 1, the EPL continues to air 200 of the 380 games and makes up a new reason as to why this rule is in place and continues to ignore calls for what most people consider to be an outdated law. Protecting lower league clubs at this stage will not be justified. However, perhaps this option by hook or by crook is the best one in the short term for the Premier League. Number 2, the Premier League goes direct to consumer at the end of the current broadcast deal and ignores any calls to scrap the blackout rule until then. This is, out of the 3, probably the nuclear option. While this is likely to happen at some point in the future, it seems likely that the relationship between Sky and the Premier League is too strong for this to happen quickly, as the 2 companies have grown the league together. If it was to happen in the short term, this would change the face of Sky as we know it, as well as pay TV in general. Number 3, the EPL scraps the 3 p.m. curfew, potentially as they feel any D2C progression in the UK is still some way down the road. The rights are opened up and more streaming companies acquire Premier League rights, potentially making it more complicated for the public and diminishing Sky's position as the home of the Premier League. This is also more likely to create further US influence into the game. These are all moving parts behind the scenes. While often unnoticed, they will remain the engine for continued growth of the EPL and the EFL. 2 leagues that, while successful in their own right, have a host of decisions to make that will go a long way to shaping the future of the game, the public's relationship with it, and the very existence of traditional TV itself. As ever, thank you very much for getting to the end of this video. Thank you everyone who's been sending comments and giving feedback about the stuff. It's all very, very much appreciated. I'm very much enjoying making these, so there will be another one coming out in the not too distant future, and I'll catch up with you then. Thanks again.